Hi everyone, today we're going to paint these beautiful purple freesias that I have here on my plate. Sorry, I bumped the camera again. But these are the freesias that I would like to paint, and the paper is just the normal Fabriano mixed media watercolor paper that I always do these little studies on. And I just drew a quick line drawing on the paper like that, just for practice. And I'm going to take some of my watercolor, this is the Mission Magella watercolors, and I'm just going to soften it with the pencil line with my putty eraser, and I'm going to mix a yellow. So let me just find the name of this yellow that I'm going to use on the palette. That is the lemon yellow mix that I have in, and I took a little bit of the permanent yellow as well. So let me just show you there, it's very light. And then I'm going to go in near the stem where I can see the yellow, and I'm going to make sure that I have a tissue in my hand as well. So I'm just using a little bit of water, and I'm going to drop in the yellow, take it into that stem there, because this is a little bud that is about to open that we're going to paint in. And then I'm going to take some of the purple. Now this is the bright clear violet purple that I have on the palette already, that's mixed there, and I'm just going to drop it in on these little parts. Then I take a bit of the pink as well. This is the quinacridone permanent rose with a drop of the rose madder that was already mixed on the plate, and I'm just going to go over there. This is a small brush. I would say a 3 or 2 brush will be perfect for painting these little sections on the freesia. Tiny, and I'm going to take some of the lines down while that is quite dry still, and while I have the mix on my brush, and I'm just pulling it down to create those little lines that I can see on the freesia bud like that. Make sure you have a nice tip on with your brush if you want to draw in or paint in those little lines. And I'm taking it up into that section as well where I painted the purple earlier, taking it down that section as well, just fine little lines. And the mixture on my brush is not too thick because I do not want it to be too dark, but it is more of a dry consistency already. And then I just go in and I rinse my brush with water and I smooth it out and push it to the top. You can see how I sweep my brush to the top because I want to create a hard line on that section there at the top. And then I'm going to take some more of the purple, and we want to paint, can you see the little bud there? I want to make sure that I get that drier section, that darker section in there on the side of the petal. And I also make sure that I don't have too much water on the tip of my brush, because normally there's a little water droplet that forms. If that water droplet runs down there, it will just create a big purple mess. I have no control over that water droplet that will touch the paper, so I make sure I always clean my brush so there's no water droplets. And I want to also make sure that I have a darker line on one side, and then I soften on that side where I had the arrow, so I don't touch the side that's much darker. I make sure that that stays dark because that is the hard line that I want to create on my paper. And with this, because it's such a light, delicate flower that we're painting, I make sure that my water is clean all the time. I make sure that my brush is rinsed properly all the time, because even though yellow won't create such a brown muddy color, I still want to make sure that I don't mix all of these colors too much. I make sure that my brush is clean, I make sure that my water is clean, and that I rinse in between, and I have my tissue paper and my little towel handy. My towel is a mix of colors. It's so pigmented you can't get it clean anymore, but I always make sure that I have a tissue paper handy as well, so I can wipe my brush on a tissue paper just to make sure that it stays nice and clean. Now we're gonna go in, I want a dark section here, and I don't want to lose what I drew on the paper, but I do want to just see how dark it is, and I want to create that little extra little petal that you can see right there that I just painted in right now. And then I go in with a bit more of the pigment to just darken those little veins that I can see on this little Freesia. Oh gosh, and now I can't remember. Did I say Freesia or Fuchsia in the beginning of the video? Anyway, this is a Freesia that we're painting. If I said Fuchsia, just ignore me. They sound the same. They don't look the same. They sound the same. Anyway, so again, I darken all of those little lines. Remember what I said about watercolors. If you follow all my beginner videos, in most of my videos explain to you that watercolors dry much lighter once they dry. So while you're painting, they might look dark. Wait a second, because they will dry completely lighted, except if it's a very staining watercolor. And remember the staining that I showed you on the tubes. Always remember what a staining watercolor looks like and what a non-staining watercolor looks like. Okay, so this is a non-staining watercolor that I use at the moment. And I'm going to go in with some of the green, so you can use some sub green here. And I'm going to go in and take it right down this little fine stem. You can't believe this stem keeps all of these little Freesia flowers up, but it does. Although mine falls over in the garden and sort of just lies all over the place, but it falls over. I had a yellow one as well in the garden, but I should actually look if I have a photo of it. We can paint it one day if you want, because these are mini tutorials that I'm doing. But I'm again dropping in some of the green. These are fun little studies that I want to do for beginners because they're easy, and I notice they're very, very popular and also lovely to paint because it's not a long 4-5 part tutorial, which some of my beginners don't want a long video yet. They want short, easy tutorials, and I'm also going to focus on a lot of those in the future. So you see that I stopped there with a green, and then I just darken with I would say use a burnt sienna or a yellow ochre just on the tip there, because that's where one of the flower buds fell off, and I do want to keep it and paint it in. So just a tiny drop. You're not going to use a lot of that, so just use what's on your plate. And then I'm going to go in with more of a pinky color on this second flower. Now, as you can see, there's like pink and purple in there, and then I'm also going to take some of the violet again. So use a quinacridone rose or a permanent rose if you have that, and then just use your normal violet that you have. If you don't have that, you can mix one with ultramarine, and you can use some of your quinacridone rose or your permanent rose to create your own beautiful purple. Also beautiful colors, so it will create a stunning purple if you don't have violet. Then I'm just going to take it all the way down there, smooth it. Want to keep it delicate, so let's lighten that pencil marking there with my putty eraser. I'm very careful not to touch that wet section there, and I'm going to just pull that down with my brush and smooth it out like this and pull it down into that section there. Now I'm going to wet this part. There's a tiny section that I want to keep as light as possible, but I'm also going to take some of those veins down here and just put it down into that section. Keep it as light as possible, smooth it out with your brush. I don't want that to run everywhere, and at the moment, because the paper was quite wet, it just runs everywhere, so I just make sure that I lift it out. And then again, a bit of that more pink, I would say it's quite a dark violet pink, it's called red violet, that I want to paint in at the top. Then I'm creating those little sections that I can see on the reference flower next to me. So very soft little markings, and I do want to make sure that the colors don't mix completely, because I do want to see that red violet mix on the flower too. And then I just take my brush and soften those little lines. So there's clean water on my brush. I do not want to take that pink all over the place, so make sure that you rinse your brush all the time. Now I'm going to just smooth out this section and clean it, and then I go around this section and I use my brush with a nice tip, and I want to darken it there, so I just dab some of that dark violet on the tip of that petal right there. I want to create that difference, that's darker section that I can see now on my reference photo. Not photo, my reference flower. There's no reference photo here. We're working on with a live little plant here, and it, as you can see, it's already dying. So, and then I just smooth it out again. Have my tissue paper handy, rinse my brush, and then I just dab it on the tissue paper. You will never make a mistake with a tissue in your hand. Always have it handy, because it will prevent flooding on your paper and a whole mix of colors that will sometimes, it's just not necessary. So make sure that you always have tissue paper or toilet paper or hand towel, whatever you want handy, so you can wipe your brush on there. I'm going to go in there again. I want to paint a darker little section in here. So this is quite a soft little flower that I'm painting now. I don't want too much detail. I want it to be soft and translucent, soft and transparent, and that's what I'm trying to create with this little fuchsia flower. I will try and give you a line drawing if you want to practice this. It will not be the exact one, but it will be very similar that you can use and just follow your own reference flower that I have there on the left hand side, and just paint along and see what it does and how it turns out, because it's always fun to paint these mini tutorials and fun little flowers. So oops, I went out the line there, but that's not a train smash. You can just lift it out and just take your tissue like that and move it. That's it. Perfect. Again, I'm going to leave that to dry, and for certain sections I actually do want to go back and just paint some of the sections in on the other flower now. Just have to be careful, because this flower where I'm working now is still wet, so preferably you want to wait for it to dry completely like that. It's exactly why we don't paint while that is still wet, but it's very easy to remove. You just take your little scrubber brush and you remove it, or tissue, but I'm going to go back later and just smooth it out while I'm painting. This is still wet, so I'm just going to darken this little petal here. I want that to be much darker, so again, just use the tip of my brush, and the consistency of paint is much thicker right now that I have there on that brush, and just on the tip, mainly on the tip, and my brush is not too wet. This is the violet, again darkening that section. I want to go much darker in there, so just tiny soft little strokes, just drop the pigment in. I also want to go in there with a darker section there, and more of that violet. And now I want to darken this part. And I want to distinguish between those two petals touching the other one, and then find the lines. And I want to darken this section here too. So the water mix on my brush and the pigment is very, very watery, and I just want to darken those little parts, not too much, because I want to keep it as light as possible on the paper. So I keep on turning the little reference in my hand, and I want to see where I can darken a bit more, where I can drop in a bit more purple, where I can, you know, just darken the tonal values, because we want to go in and add all of the darker little sections now. So again, once you get to that stage, your pigment and water ratio on your paper and on your brush and on your palette will be a lot less watery. So just always make sure that you remember that, because you want to add more detail now. So yeah, I'm going to go in with that violet mix, darkening this little section here, and this is some of that red violet that has dried now on my palette, and I'm going to take it in, drop those little sections in, because I want to go in with a darker mix, and then smooth it out with my brush, just like that. And this is a study, so I'm not too stressed about anything. I just want to have fun with this painting, practice some brush strokes, paint these tiny little flowers that I have in the garden sometimes, and when they flower and you have a live subject, paint it, have fun. If you make a mistake, it's for you. It's for no one else to see. It's for you. And you don't have to show anyone. You just want to paint for yourself, and you want to, you know, do this because the more you paint, the more you will learn about the paint ratio. You will learn what paper you like more. You will learn which brush you prefer, which pigments you prefer, which colors you prefer. Do you like staining? Do you like non-staining? Do you like transparent? Do you like semi-transparent? Do you like opaque watercolors? Maybe you prefer acrylic paint. But this is the only way you're going to learn is by doing these tiny little studies every now and again. So get your book out, buy a cheap book. And when I say cheap, I don't mean the cheapest book that is like horrible paper that when you paint on it, you never want to paint in watercolor again because you think that, oh my word, if this is how watercolor is, it's definitely not for me. You want to buy a good quality watercolor paper book to still practice on. So when I say cheap, I mean the Kanzen XL watercolor book is not the most expensive book, but it's fun because it has a spiral little paper where you can turn around and paint, and if you don't like something, they actually have a section where you can tear the paper out and get rid of it, rid of any evidence, and you don't want anyone to see that, so you can hide it. No one has to see that if you make a mistake. But if you want to keep it for yourself, and because you want to learn, don't throw it away, keep it. Because I have a few of those books, and honestly, I wouldn't show anyone those paintings that I did, because you're still learning. You make mistakes and you learn from your mistakes, but it is part of the learning journey. I can tell you now that everyone has made mistakes and had to throw away a few paintings, even some of their best watercolor artists. So here it is. You see that? You can tear it out and you can flip it over and start again. And what I like about these little spiral books is because they have these little spirals, and it's a flip book. Okay, so now that we spoke about books, and these are not the only books that you can get. I know there is is it Bookingfoot? I don't have their names with me right now, but do you get a good quality watercolor book that you can paint in? Because you can get horrible watercolor papers. It's like 100 GSM watercolor paper that's horrible to paint with, and will definitely prevent you or make sure that you will never paint again with that paper, because you will think it's you, and it's not you, it's actually the paper. So just spend a tiny bit more and get a proper little book. They're not expensive and they are lovely to paint with. I use that often. I painted the jelly beans with as well in this little aquarelle book. And then the mixed media watercolor paper that I showed you before, also a very good brand. It just, this one doesn't have a spiral. So yes, it depends what brand you buy. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to darken these little sections again, take those little veins that I can see on the Freesia down these little sections here. And you can go and paint, if you have Freesias in your garden, find more, draw them in your book and practice them, because this will honestly make and help you to paint more, and you will enjoy the process, especially on weekends when you don't really feel like painting something specific. Practice these little flowers, even on a card, and you can, if it turns out nice, you can always give it as a gift to someone for their birthday, or as a Mother's Day, or if you have a friend, as a gift to a friend. So these little paintings are always fun. So again, I'm just going to go in there and darken these little sections, and I'm not necessarily going to wet all of these right now. I might do a glaze later, and I might soften it with my brush if I go back now, but I do want that beautiful red violet mix to show on the paper. So I'm very careful not to wet it immediately, because if you wet that I just painted in now, it will disappear. You will soften it too much, and you won't have that red beautiful mixes on your petal, and I definitely want to keep that there. So this was just a fun mini tutorial. I'm going to use my scrubber brush because I just want to lift out some of that white on the petals there, and this is how easy it is. You just take a flat brush, take your tissue paper, scrub a bit. This paper you can't scrub on too much, but it is not bad. Just be careful, you don't want to scrub too much. And then I just go in with my brush and I soften those little markings that I painted earlier. So this is a fun tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon with a new tutorial.